The departure hall buzzed with a kind of restless energy only airports could conjure. Rolling suitcases bumped against polished tiles. Departure boards flickered with names of cities that promised escape, and the sharp, metallic voice of the intercom announced final calls no one really wanted to miss. Among the chaos, Adrian Cole walked like a man untouched by it all. Tall, composed, and dressed in a tailored navy suit, Adrian looked like the type of man who belonged everywhere and answered to no one. His hand rested firmly on the small of Celeste's back, guiding her through the crowd as though the entire terminal were their private runway. Celeste thrived in that illusion. Dressed in a silk cream blouse and wide-legged black trousers that swayed with each step, she carried herself with the confidence of a woman who had already won. Her arm hooked tightly around Adrian's, clinging not just for affection but for proof. Proof that this man was hers, that their future was carved in stone. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His smile was faint, polite, but his eyes scanned constantly, flicking toward corners and faces. He had lived too long with secrets to ever feel entirely at ease. And here, in the bright fluorescence of a terminal filled with families, businessmen and backpackers, his secret life felt precariously exposed. "Relax," Celeste whispered, leaning closer so only he could hear. Her perfume, sharp, expensive, filled his senses. "You look like you're about to be audited." Adrian forced a chuckle. "Just thinking ahead." "You know how I am. Always thinking ahead," she teased, though the curve of her smile had an edge. "But this time we're leaving everything behind."
"Paris, Adrian."
"You promised. Just you and me. If this story inspired you, give it a like, pass it along, and share where you're joining us from." Her words were meant to soothe, but they landed like a warning. Adrian had promised many things. Promises had a way of stacking, and the weight pressed on him now more than his carry-on ever could. He straightened his cufflinks, the gesture more nervous than refined. They approached the check-in counter, a shining barrier between their imagined future and the truth he had left behind. The young attendant smiled mechanically, asking for passports. Adrian handed them over with steady hands, though inside he was far from steady. His heart thudded against his ribs, betraying the calm exterior he fought to maintain. As Celeste leaned against the counter, her manicured nails drumming lightly, she looked over her shoulder at the crowded hall. She enjoyed the stares. She knew people saw them as a powerful pair, glamorous, enviable, but beneath her polished exterior she too searched. Not for strangers, but for shadows. For Serena. The name was unspoken between them in moments like these, yet it filled the silence. Serena, Adrian's wife. The woman who still held the title, the house, and the family name. Celeste hated how permanent she sounded even in thought. Mistress sounded temporary. She wanted to be more. She needed to be more. The attendant returned the passports with a practiced smile. "Gate 12, boarding in 35 minutes. Have a pleasant flight." Adrian nodded, his hand brushing against Celeste's as they gathered their things. For a moment he felt relief. Each step toward security felt like leaving behind the life that strangled him. But as they turned from the counter, a child's laugh echoed faintly in the distance, rising above the hum of conversation and rolling wheels. The sound stabbed through his composure, sharp and disarming. He faltered, just for a breath, just enough for Celeste to notice. "What is it?" she asked softly, her grip tightening on his arm. Adrian forced another smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing. Just thought I heard something." But deep inside, he knew. Secrets don't stay hidden forever, and sometimes they call out to you, innocent, small, and impossible to ignore. The child's laugh lingered in Adrian's mind as he and Celeste disappeared into the crowd at the airport. But while he tried to silence it, memory refused to be buried. It pulled him backward, years earlier, into a life that had once felt safe, certain, and unshakable. It had been 12 years since Adrian stood across from Serena in a sunlit chapel, watching her veil lift as if revealing the rest of his life. She was radiant that day. Dark hair pinned with pearls, eyes glistening not from nerves but from joy. The applause of friends and family filled the air as they kissed, sealing what everyone called a perfect union. Adrian had believed it too. In that moment, he wanted nothing else. For years afterward, their marriage played out like the picture-perfect life they had promised each other. Wedding photos framed their living room. Serena's laughter echoed through dinners lit with candlelight and wine. Summers were filled with family vacations to the coast. their young son building sandcastles while Serena held Adrian's hand and told him she couldn't imagine life any other way. But perfection has a way of decaying quietly, almost imperceptibly until one day it cannot be denied. The first cracks appeared when Adrian's business empire began expanding. Late-night calls, international flights, and weekend meetings multiplied. At first, Serena accepted it. She would set his plate aside, warm it when he returned, and wait in their bed with a book she never really read. But nights turned into weeks and weeks into months. Adrian's absences grew longer. The seat across from her at the table remained empty, and their bed grew colder. Serena tried to mask the ache. She poured her energy into their son, into volunteering at the local shelter, into pretending. But when she found herself eating alone more often than not, she began to wonder what occupied her husband when it wasn't her. Adrian, on the other hand, convinced himself it was all for them. For her, for their child, for the house with the sprawling garden she had always dreamed of. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't just ambition. It was escape. Escape from routine, from the expectations of husband and father, from the weight of promises that now felt suffocating. The distance between them wasn't built in a single fight, but in silence. Unspoken resentments layered like dust on furniture no one touched. Serena's eyes searched his when he came home late, but his gaze slipped past hers. The words she wanted to ask, "Where were you? Who were you with?" died on her lips because she already feared the answers. One evening, Serena sat in their living room, the flicker of a muted television casting shadows against the wall. Adrian walked in, loosening his tie, smelling faintly of a cologne that wasn't his. She noticed but said nothing. Instead, she studied his reflection in the glass cabinet that held their wedding china. In that reflection, he looked like a stranger, polished, tired, distant. "Long day?" she asked softly. "The usual," he muttered, kissing her cheek quickly before retreating upstairs. His phone buzzed in his pocket as he climbed, and Serena caught the flash of a smile he hadn't given her in years. Her suspicion grew not from evidence but from absence. The absence of intimacy, of warmth, of effort. Trust eroded, not in dramatic betrayals but in everyday neglect. She felt herself becoming invisible in her own marriage, a supporting character in a life she once believed she co-authored. Still, Serena clung to hope. She folded his shirts, she set the table for three. She told herself he was just tired, but deep down her instincts stirred. A woman knows when love has shifted, when a man's heart no longer lives in the same house as his body. And though Serena tried to silence that instinct, it was already awake, watchful, restless, waiting for proof. Far away in the present, Adrian tightened his grip on Celeste's hand at the airport, dragging himself back into the now. But Serena's face, the face of the woman who once believed in him more than anyone, hovered in his mind. Her shadow was still there, even as he tried to run. Adrian's thoughts of Serena dissolved into the background hum of the airport as Celeste pressed closer against him. She was always so sure of herself in public, so bold in her claim. Where Serena had been quiet, steady, and patient, Celeste was fire and sparkle. She wanted to be seen. More than that, she wanted to be recognized as the woman who had won. Walking through the terminal, Celeste tilted her chin upward, catching the reflection of herself in a wall of glass near a luxury boutique. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders in deliberate waves. Her blouse clung in all the right places, and her heels clicked with a rhythm that demanded attention. She liked what she saw. Power, beauty, destiny, and most importantly, him. Adrian at her side meant she was not simply another woman dressed well in an airport. It meant status, a future. To anyone watching, she was the woman a millionaire chose to fly across the world with. That reality tasted sweet. She thought of Paris, of the penthouse Adrian had described, with its balcony overlooking the Seine. She pictured herself there in silk robes, sipping champagne while Adrian whispered that she was his only love. But as intoxicating as the fantasy was, there was always the shadow. Always the other name. Serena Celeste never spoke it aloud, not when Adrian was near. Yet the name hovered in her mind like smoke she couldn't clear. Serena was still the wife, still the woman with the documents and the ring. Celeste hated the idea that somewhere, at that very moment, Serena sat in Adrian's house, their son asleep down the hall while she, the mistress, was sneaking through airports with stolen time. The thought pricked at her pride. She pulled herself closer to Adrian now, her hand gripping his arm tighter, almost possessive. "When we land, I want to see it," she said suddenly. "See what?" Adrian asked, his eyes darting to the boarding gates as though distracted. "The apartment you promised. The one overlooking the river. You said it was ready." Adrian hesitated, then smoothed his features into a smile. "It will be ready soon. Don't worry, Celeste. Soon." Her tone sharpened, slicing through the air between them. "You've been saying that for months. When is it going to be real?" Adrian adjusted his grip on the handle of his carry-on. "I told you these things take time. There are legal complications." The word legal made her blood heat. It always meant Serena. Always the wife. Always the tether he refused to cut. Celeste forced a laugh, though it rang hollow. "Complications. That's one word for it. Meanwhile, I'm still sneaking around, still the secret. Do you know how that makes me look?" Adrian stopped, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't need to worry about how it looks. You have me, Celeste." "Isn't that enough?" For a moment, her pride wanted to answer yes, to say it was enough to revel in the exclusivity of his attention here and now. But something deeper, something sharper said no. She didn't just want his time or his money or his whispered promises. She wanted his name. She wanted the permanence Serena still held. She smiled instead, pressing a hand to his chest. "Of course, for now." Adrian kissed her forehead lightly, grateful for the facade of peace. But as they resumed walking, Celeste's eyes hardened. She wasn't a woman content with, "for now." At the far end of the terminal, the intercom announced boarding for another flight. The sound echoed sharp and commanding, and Celeste's pulse quickened. She imagined herself boarding a plane not as the mistress, but as the wife. The future she saw was glittering, but it came with a price. And Celeste had already decided. She would not remain in the shadows forever. While Celeste walked through the terminal imagining her future, Serena Cole stood in her quiet kitchen, staring at the glow of the refrigerator light. The house was too still. It had been like this for months, rooms echoing with absence, nights stretching on with no footsteps on the stairs, no voice saying goodnight. Adrian's suitcase had been by the door again that morning, and once more he had left without answering her unspoken questions. Serena closed the refrigerator door and turned back toward the dining table. His plate sat untouched just as it had 3 nights ago and the week before that. She slid it into the sink, her movements sharp, and caught the faintest scent of cologne, not his usual one. Something new, stronger, sharper, clinging to the scarf draped over the back of a chair. She froze. The scarf wasn't hers. Her hand hovered over the fabric, afraid to confirm what she already knew. When her fingers finally touched it, the silk was smooth, foreign, unfamiliar. A woman's scarf. She pressed it to her nose, and the scent of another life wrapped around her. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe she was imagining it, that it was some corporate gift or leftover from a client dinner, but her instincts whispered otherwise. Instincts she had been silencing for too long. Later that evening, while folding laundry, Serena noticed another irregularity. The credit card bill left on the counter. At first glance, nothing unusual. But then her eyes caught on the charges. A luxury boutique she had never stepped foot in. A hotel across town she had never visited. Line after line, the truth revealed itself in numbers, and her stomach turned with every discovery. She sat down heavily, the paper trembling in her hands. He's lying. He's living another life while pretending ours still exists. Serena heard the soft padding of feet. Noah, their 7-year-old son, shuffled in wearing pajamas patterned with rockets. He rubbed his eyes and leaned against the doorway. "Mommy," he mumbled. "Can you tuck me in?" Serena forced a smile, folding the bill quickly, shoving it beneath the laundry basket. "Of course, sweetheart." "Why are you still awake?" He shrugged. "I was waiting for Daddy. He said he'd read me a story when he got back. But he didn't." The words pierced her like glass. She reached for him, pulling him close, pressing her lips to his hair. "Daddy's very busy right now," she said softly, though her voice faltered. "But I'm here. I'll always be here." As she tucked Noah into bed, his innocent eyes blinked up at her. "Mom, why doesn't Daddy tuck me in anymore? Doesn't he love me?" Her chest constricted. She smoothed the blanket over him, her hand trembling. "Of course he loves you. He forgets sometimes. Grown-ups forget things when they're tired." But even as she spoke, she knew children see truths adults try to bury. Noah's loneliness mirrored her own, and it awakened something fierce inside her. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind circling the evidence like a storm. The scarf, the bills, the weekends Adrian claimed to be working. Every detail pointed to betrayal. Her heart ached not just as a wife, but as a mother. The thought of Noah growing up watching lies rot a family terrified her. She wanted to protect him from the darkness she now felt pressing at the edges of their home, but to protect him she needed answers. She rose quietly from bed, moving to Adrian's study. In the glow of his desk lamp, she opened drawers, shuffled through receipts, checked his calendar. The pieces were scattered, but her instincts pieced them together like a puzzle she didn't want to solve. He isn't just absent. He's somewhere else, with someone else. Tears pricked her eyes, but she brushed them away. This wasn't the time for breaking. This was the time for clarity, for truth. And yet, as she closed the study door, Serena's chest filled with dread. She feared what the truth would demand of her. She feared it would end not just her marriage, but the family Noah adored. Back at the airport, Adrian and Celeste moved closer to their gate, unaware that Serena's quiet resolve had begun to form. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she had instincts, and instincts, once awakened, do not sleep again. The scarf, the credit card bills, the missed bedtimes, they were threads Serena couldn't ignore. Still, some part of her clung to denial, desperate for proof that would exonerate her husband. But proof doesn't always bring comfort. Sometimes it destroys what little hope remains. It was late afternoon when Serena wandered into Adrian's study again, sunlight spilling across the mahogany desk. She told herself she was just tidying, just putting things in order, but her hands had a will of their own. She opened drawers, sifted through folders, skimmed envelopes, and then she found it. A slim, cream-colored folder tucked beneath a stack of trade reports. Her fingers hesitated, trembling before they pulled it free. Inside were printed e-tickets, airline confirmations, flight itineraries. Her eyes scanned the page once, twice, as if she had misread. Paris, departing Saturday. Passenger 1, Adrian Cole. Passenger 2, Celeste Ward. The words blurred. The air thinned. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. One way, not business class for a conference, not a return ticket for a family holiday. One way, a departure without intention to return. The folder slipped from her hands, scattering papers across the desk. Serena pressed her palms flat against the wood, steadying herself as waves of nausea and rage surged together. She had suspected lies. She had feared betrayal. But this was abandonment. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was planning a future without her, without Noah, without the family they had built. Her eyes burned as she whispered into the silence of the room. He was going to leave us. Every photograph around her, the wedding portrait on the shelf, Noah's school picture pinned to the corkboard, suddenly felt like artifacts of a life Adrian had already discarded. Serena sank into the leather chair, clutching the itinerary, staring at her husband's name printed so casually beside another woman's. Celeste. The name she had never spoken, yet always feared. The woman who had his time, his attention, and now, apparently, his future. The heartbreak was sharp, but it quickly hardened into something else. Resolve. If Adrian thought he could slip away unnoticed, if he believed he could simply exchange one family for another, he had underestimated her. Serena wasn't the naive bride who once clung to promises. She was a mother now, and mothers do not surrender without a fight. The sound of the front door jolted her upright. Keys jingled, footsteps crossed the hall. Adrian was home earlier than expected. Serena stuffed the itinerary back into the folder and shoved it into the desk drawer, her heart pounding. Serena? Adrian's voice floated in, casual, tired. Where's Noah? She forced her voice steady. Upstairs, napping. Adrian stepped into the doorway, loosening his tie. His eyes drifted over her, pausing just long enough to notice the tension in her shoulders. You okay? Serena smiled faintly, masking the storm. Fine. Just tired. He nodded, already distracted, already elsewhere. His phone buzzed, and she caught the flicker of satisfaction in his expression as he checked it. A text, no doubt from her, from Celeste. Serena's hand tightened on the armrest. She wanted to hurl the truth in his face, to watch him squirm under the weight of his lies. But not yet. Timing was everything. A confrontation at the wrong moment would let him wriggle free, charm his way out with practiced lies. No, this had to be public, undeniable, a moment he couldn't escape. She rose calmly and kissed Noah goodnight later that evening, lingering by his side longer than usual. Her son's small hand clutched hers, grounding her in the chaos of her emotions. "I love you, sweetheart," she whispered more fiercely than she intended. Downstairs, Adrian packed quietly for another business trip. He thought his secrets were safe. He thought his departure would be clean, but Serena knew now, and she had already decided. If Adrian was going to the airport with Celeste, then she would be there too, far across town. Celeste imagined Parisian lights and champagne nights, unaware that Serena's heartbreak had already sharpened into a blade of resolve. The confrontation was no longer a question of if. It was a question of when. The plan had formed in Serena's mind with terrifying clarity. Adrian believed he was clever, believed his deception was airtight, but he had overlooked one thing: her resolve. She could not allow him to vanish into another life, taking her son's father and her dignity with him. If he wanted to leave, then the truth would be torn into the open where no denial could hide it. The morning of his departure, Serena woke before dawn. She dressed Noah in his favorite navy hoodie and jeans, his small backpack slung over his shoulders. He asked no questions, only blinking sleepily as she urged him into the car. Her heart ached as she buckled him in. He deserved answers as much as she did. The drive to the airport was quiet, broken only by the hum of the engine and Noah's occasional questions. "Are we going to see Daddy?" he asked, and her grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Yes," Serena whispered. "We're going to see Daddy." By the time they arrived, the terminal was alive with movement. Travelers hurried past, dragging luggage, voices layered in a cacophony of departures and reunions. Serena parked in long-term and walked hand in hand with Noah toward the sliding glass doors. Each step felt heavier but also sharper. She wasn't here as a victim. She was here for truth. Inside, Adrian was already at the check-in counter. He looked polished, composed, his navy suit crisp, his leather shoes gleaming. But there was a nervous twitch in his jaw as he handed over passports. Beside him, Celeste glowed with a smugness Serena had only ever imagined. Her manicured hand clung tightly to Adrian's arm, her laugh too loud, her posture exuding triumph. She wanted to be seen. She wanted everyone to know she had won. Serena froze for a moment in the middle of the terminal, her pulse thundering in her ears. The sight was worse than she had prepared for. This wasn't suspicion or whispered doubt. This was her husband openly choosing another woman. Noah tugged her sleeve. "Mommy? That's Daddy." His voice rang out with innocent clarity, the words slicing through the buzz of the airport. Serena steadied her breath. Not yet. She needed the moment to strike like lightning, not drizzle. She adjusted Noah's backpack and guided him closer, weaving through the crowd until they stood at the edge of the check-in line. Adrian glanced over his shoulder, scanning the hall the way a man does when he's carrying secrets. His eyes skimmed the crowd, then stopped. He saw her. For a fraction of a second, he froze, his face draining of color. The passports nearly slipped from his hand. Serena held his gaze, unflinching. Her presence was silent, but it hit him like a storm breaking. She had followed. She had caught him. And worst of all, she wasn't alone. Noah spotted him fully now and lit up with joy.
"Dad," he called, his little voice ringing above the crowd.
"Daddy!" The word cracked through the air, loud enough for the check-in attendant to glance up, for Celeste's smug smile to falter. Heads turned. Whispers rippled. Celeste's grip on Adrian's arm tightened, her knuckles whitening. "Who is that?" she demanded in a low hiss, though the answer was already dawning in her eyes. Adrian's throat constricted. He tried to form words to gather the composure that had carried him through boardrooms and negotiations. But here, in this bright public space, his lies collapsed. Serena stepped forward, her hand resting firmly on Noah's shoulder. Her eyes never left Adrian's. "Say hello to your son, Adrian," she said, her voice steady, cold. "He's been waiting for you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Celeste pulled her arm away as though burned, staring between Adrian and the boy with a mixture of shock and betrayal. The crowd swelled around them. strangers pretending not to watch while secretly devouring every second. Adrian opened his mouth, but no excuse came. No polished lie could cover the evidence standing before him. The wife he had abandoned, the child he had neglected both here in flesh and blood. His double life had collided violently, irreversibly. Serena tilted her chin upward, her expression unyielding. This was no private confrontation behind closed doors. This was the truth unveiled for all to see. The attendant cleared her throat awkwardly, setting down the passports. Around them the hum of the airport resumed, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. The trap had sprung and Adrian was caught. The word cut through the air sharper than any blade. "Dad?" Noah's voice was small, unassuming, but it carried with the force of truth. It was not accusation, not betrayal, just innocence. Yet in that single syllable, Adrian's carefully constructed world cracked wide open. Adrian froze where he stood. His spine stiffened, his grip on the passports turned to stone, his face drained of all color. His body betrayed him before his mind could react. His first instinct was denial, to pretend he hadn't heard. But the word was too clear, too loud, too undeniable. Celeste stiffened beside him. Her arm, once wrapped proudly around his, recoiled as though burned. Her head turned slowly toward Adrian, her painted lips parting, her expression hardening into disbelief. She didn't have to ask who the child was. She already knew. Serena's eyes locked with his. They were not wild with rage nor broken with grief. They were calm, steady, devastating in their clarity. For Adrian, that look was worse than shouting. It meant she had known. It meant she had been waiting for this moment, preparing the battlefield where he would fall. Noah tugged at his mother's hand and called again, louder this time. "Dad!" His voice rang above the terminal's hum, echoing into every corner. The effect was immediate. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Strangers slowed their pace, eyes flicking toward the scene unfolding at the check-in counter. A businessman paused mid-step. A young couple clutched each other. A group of travelers lowered their phones only to raise them again. This time to record. Adrian felt the weight of every stare pressing into him. He had spent a lifetime cultivating control, his reputation spotless, his charm disarming. But here, in the sterile light of an airport terminal, control slipped through his fingers. Celeste's voice cracked the silence, sharp as glass. "That's your child?" she hissed, though the question wasn't really a question. It was confirmation of her worst suspicion. Adrian tried to speak, but his throat constricted. Words tangled uselessly, excuses collapsing before they reached his lips. He looked at Serena, desperate for a lifeline, but found only resolve. Serena placed a steady hand on Noah's shoulder. "Go on, sweetheart," she murmured softly, though her eyes never left Adrian. "Say hello to your father." Noah beamed, lifting his small hand in a wave. "Hi, Dad." The innocence of it shattered what little composure Adrian still clung to. His vision blurred, his ears roared. He wanted to snatch the passports, to flee into the anonymity of boarding gates and crowded planes. But the trap was sprung and every direction was blocked, not by walls but by eyes. Whispers swelled around them. That's his wife. That's their kid. And who's the other woman? The speculation was electric, hungry, merciless. Celeste stepped back, her heels clicking hard against the tile. "You told me you were done with her," she spat, voice trembling with betrayal. "You said you were free." Adrian finally found his voice, broken and hoarse. "Celeste, please," but she cut him off with a bitter laugh. Don't you dare." She turned her gaze to Serena, and for the first time her confidence faltered. She had believed she was the future, but now she saw what she truly was, the secret, exposed and humiliated. Serena didn't move, didn't speak beyond the calm of her eyes. She didn't need to. Adrian's silence, Noah's words, and Celeste's reaction had already said everything. The lie collapsed in real time, and the man who had once stood untouchable now looked small, cornered and stripped bare. Adrian swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "Serena, please not here." But Serena's lips curved into something between sorrow and triumph. "Here is exactly where it ends, Adrian. In the open, where everyone can see who you really are." Around them, the terminal buzzed back to life, but the whispers lingered like smoke. The illusion was gone. What remained was ruin, and the world had just witnessed its collapse. For a moment, the entire terminal seemed to hold its breath. The weight of Noah's innocent words still hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. But silence could not last, not when betrayal had been dragged into the light. Adrian reached for Serena, his voice cracking. "Please, let's not do this here." Serena's hand shot up, stopping him mid-step. Her eyes burned with a fury years in the making. "Not here?" she echoed, her voice sharp enough to slice through the buzz of the terminal. "Where else, Adrian? In the shadows? Behind locked doors? That's where you built your lies. No. Here is exactly where they end." The crowd shifted closer, drawn like moths to flame. Some lifted their phones higher, recording the downfall of a man who once appeared untouchable. Strangers murmured, their words swirling into a storm of judgment. "That's his wife. That's his mistress. And that's his kid." Adrian's face flushed crimson. His polished mask, so carefully maintained in boardrooms and country clubs, slipped, revealing panic beneath. "Serena, please. We can talk about this at home." Her laugh was cold, jagged. "Home? You mean the place you abandoned long ago? The place where our son waits for a father who never comes?" Her voice rose, trembling with years of swallowed pain. "Do you know how many nights he asked why you didn't tuck him in? Do you know how many lies I had to tell to cover for you?" Noah looked up at her, wide-eyed, not fully grasping the storm but sensing the hurt. Serena smoothed his hair, her hand gentle even as her fury blazed outward. Celeste took a step back, her posture stiff, her eyes darting between Adrian and Serena. For weeks she had dreamed of this very moment, of Adrian choosing her, of leaving the wife behind. But this wasn't triumph. This was exposure. She realized with a hollow ache that she wasn't stepping into his world as his equal. She was being dragged into his collapse as a pawn. "You told me you were free?" Celeste spat, her voice cracking under the weight of humiliation. "You told me she was nothing but paper, that it was over." Serena's eyes flicked to her, cold and cutting. "Paper, that's what you think a marriage is? 12 years, a child, vows spoken in front of God and family. Paper?" She shook her head, disgust curling her lip. "No, Celeste. What you have is paper. Empty promises scribbled by a liar who couldn't even keep his family intact." Adrian's hands trembled as he reached out, desperate to contain the implosion. "Both of you, stop this. You don't understand," but Serena cut him down with a glare. "No, Adrian. You don't understand. You thought you could live 2 lives, thought you could split yourself in half. But the truth doesn't divide. It explodes." The sharp tone drew the attention of airport security. 2 uniformed officers pushed through the circle of onlookers, their radios crackling. "Sir, ma'am, I need you both to calm down," one officer said firmly, planting himself between Adrian and Serena. Adrian raised his hands, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's fine. It's just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Serena's voice broke with rage. "Tell them, Adrian. Tell them how you were about to fly away with your mistress and abandon your wife and child." The officer's eyes flicked toward the check-in counter where the attendant still held the evidence. 2 passports, one ticketed with Adrian's name, the other with Celeste's. It was all there. In black and white, Celeste's face crumpled. She wanted to argue, to salvage dignity, but the evidence was undeniable. She yanked her arm from Adrian's reach, her voice trembling. "You never planned to leave for me, did you? You just wanted me as long as it was convenient. I was never the future. I was just the escape." Her words landed like another blow, tearing the last shreds of his polished image away. Adrian's shoulders slumped, his mouth opening but failing to form a defense. Around him, the crowd saw not a powerful businessman, but a man undone by his own duplicity. Serena straightened, her hand firm on Noah's shoulder. Her anger simmered into something colder, steadier. "You wanted freedom, Adrian? Here it is. You're free, from me, from our son, from the life you spat on. And you're free in the only way cowards ever are. Alone." Security moved in closer, urging the gathering to disperse, but the damage was done. Adrian's double life had crumbled under fluorescent lights and public eyes. No spin, no charm, no apology could rebuild what had just shattered. As Serena turned to lead Noah away, her fury hardened into resolve. The scandal wasn't confined to this terminal. It would spill into boardrooms, tabloids, and courtrooms. Adrian's ruin had only just begun. The airport confrontation was only the beginning. By the following morning, the story had already spread beyond the terminal walls. Grainy cell phone videos flooded social media. Captions screaming betrayal. "Millionaire caught at airport with mistress, wife confronts him with child." The footage went viral. The clip of Noah's innocent voice, "Dad?" circulating faster than Adrian could contain the damage. Within days, tabloids plastered his face across glossy covers. Headlines painted him as a villain, a man who betrayed his wife and humiliated his family in the cold light of day. His polished image, once untouchable, became a spectacle of ridicule. Adrian's business empire, built on reputation as much as numbers, began to fracture. Partners distanced themselves, worried their association would stain their own names. Invitations to conferences were rescinded. Investors pulled back. In boardrooms where his voice had once commanded respect, silence replaced applause. He was radioactive, and everyone knew it. Serena watched from a distance, both pained and vindicated. She had not orchestrated the scandal, but she would not apologize for truth revealed. Still, she understood humiliation alone would not protect her or Noah. Justice needed to be legal, final, permanent. So she called her lawyer, in a sleek downtown office. Serena sat across from a woman who spoke with clarity and precision. "You have leverage," the lawyer explained, tapping her manicured nail against a file of documents. "The public exposure, the child custody angle, the evidence of infidelity. He will try to fight, but he will lose. If you want divorce, custody, financial justice, it can be yours." For the first time in months, Serena felt her voice carry weight. She nodded. "I want it all. For Noah. For me." The filings were swift, the papers served with cold efficiency. Adrian, already drowning in scandal, now faced a legal storm he could not charm his way out of. Court documents detailed his betrayals, his financial negligence, his intention to abandon his family. Judges do not look kindly on fathers who trade vows for mistresses and try to flee across oceans. Celeste, once so radiant on Adrian's arm, vanished from sight. Her name was dragged into headlines, her image blurred in gossip columns, but she released no statement. For weeks she was invisible, leaving Adrian to face the collapse alone. She had wanted his name, his status, his future. Instead, she inherited the shame of his destruction. Adrian spiraled. Nights were spent in hotel bars, whiskey replacing the silk sheets he once slept on. His phone buzzed with calls he no longer answered. Creditors, lawyers, journalists. The man who once strode with confidence now stumbled with defeat, his empire reduced to ashes of bad press and broken trust. Meanwhile, Serena rebuilt. She moved carefully but firmly, piecing together a new life where Noah was the center, not the collateral. Custody was granted to her without contest after Adrian's lawyers realized fighting would only worsen his reputation. Financial settlements secured their future. College funds, the family home, stability she had feared was lost. But Serena's victory was not only legal, it was personal. At a women's support group, she stood one evening and shared her story aloud for the first time. Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied, growing stronger with each word. She spoke of betrayal, of lies, of the silence that eats away at love. She spoke of finding strength not in anger, but in survival. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, not for her pain, but for her resilience. For Serena, that applause mattered more than any court ruling. It meant she was no longer invisible. She had reclaimed her voice. Adrian's name continued to rot in tabloids, a cautionary tale of arrogance and downfall. Serena no longer flinched when she saw his face in headlines. She looked, acknowledged, and turned the page. And so the story shifted. Adrian had lost everything, his wife, his son, his reputation. Celeste had vanished. But Serena, once silenced and betrayed, stood taller than before. The world knew the scandal. Serena now knew her strength. Winter had passed and spring stretched across the city with new life. The scandal had faded from the tabloids, replaced by fresher stories of betrayal and downfall. Adrian's name still appeared occasionally, attached to lawsuits, failed ventures, and whispers of bankruptcy. But in Serena's home, his presence was gone. Gone, but not forgotten. Serena sat on a wooden bench in the quiet corner of a park, the kind of place where laughter floated from playgrounds and sunlight spilled across the grass like a promise. Beside her, Noah clutched a melting ice cream cone, his legs swinging freely above the ground. His hoodie was smudged with chocolate, his smile wide, his eyes free of shadows. She watched him for a long moment, her chest swelling with something deeper than relief. Months ago, she had feared he would be scarred by Adrian's betrayal, that the lies and the scandal would stain his childhood. But children are resilient in ways adults are not. Noah still asked questions sometimes. Why Daddy wasn't coming back, why they couldn't all live together again. Serena answered gently, honestly, without bitterness. She told him love could change, that sometimes people made choices that hurt others, but none of it was his fault. And slowly he believed her. The wind carried laughter from the swings. Serena tilted her head back, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought of who she had been not so long ago. A woman silenced by suspicion, trapped in half-truths, afraid of what the answers might bring. That woman had sat alone at a dinner table, pretending the empty seat across from her didn't ache. That woman had covered for a father who never came home. That woman had whispered reassurances to a child while silently breaking inside. But that woman no longer existed. The betrayal hadn't destroyed her. It had stripped her bare, revealed the raw steel she hadn't realized she carried. Strength, not weakness, was what remained. She had faced Adrian at his boldest, fought him at his cruelest, and walked away with her dignity intact. She had endured the whispers, the cameras, the legal battles, and she had survived, more than survived. She had won. Noah leaned against her, sticky fingers brushing her hand. Without hesitation, Serena entwined her fingers with his. The small warmth of his palm grounded her more than any settlement or headline ever could. This was what mattered. This was what remained when the empire of lies had crumbled. "Mom?" Noah asked suddenly, his voice carrying the innocent seriousness only children could summon. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we okay now?" Serena smiled, her throat tightening. She squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening. "Yes," she said softly. "We're better than okay." He nodded as though satisfied, turning his focus back to the ice cream before it dripped onto his shoes. Serena watched him, and in his simplicity she found peace. Adrian was gone from their lives. She had not seen him in months, though rumors said he drifted from one city to another, chasing deals that always collapsed before they began. Celeste had disappeared altogether, her name nothing more than a footnote in gossip columns. They were both ghosts now, shadows of choices that once threatened to consume her. But Serena no longer carried them. Instead, she carried Noah's laughter, the quiet strength of evenings spent without fear, the knowledge that she had faced devastation and walked through it. She was not merely a woman left behind. She was a mother who had endured betrayal and turned it into armor. She rose from the bench, brushing crumbs from her skirt. Noah jumped down beside her, slipping his hand firmly into hers. Together they walked across the park, the sun casting long golden streaks on the path ahead. For the first time in years, Serena didn't look back. The world had seen her broken. The world had seen her humiliated. But now the world would see her triumphant, because Serena was no longer just a wife betrayed. She was a mother reborn. If this story inspired you, give it a like, pass it along, and share where you're joining us from.